The sun had barely risen over the dusty hills of the American Southwest, casting a golden glow on the rugged landscape. The air was dry and hot even in the early morning, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and earth. In a hidden canyon, far from the nearest settlement, a small group of Apache warriors moved silently, their eyes sharp, their bodies ready for anything. Among them was a girl, not yet 15, but with the heart of a warrior. Her dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders, her skin sun-kissed, and her eyes held a fire that made her seem older than her years. She had grown up, learning to track, to run, and to fight, skills that had kept her alive in a land that demanded toughness from anyone who lived on it. But today was not a day for hunting or training. Today, she felt a strange tension in the air, a warning she could not ignore. The wind carried a different sound. The faint clatter of hooves on rocks, the distant call of a horn. Her elders had taught her to listen, to read the signs of danger, and her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Before she could react, a group of men appeared from behind the rocks. They were not Apache. Their clothing was strange, their weapons different, but their intentions were clear. The girl tried to run, her feet moving quickly over the uneven ground. But the men were too many, too fast. They surrounded her and the other young warriors, shouting orders she could not understand. Fear and anger surged together inside her. She fought, kicking and struggling, refusing to be taken without a fight. But one of the men struck her with the blunt end of a rifle. Darkness came over her eyes as she fell to the ground, the sounds of shouts and horses fading into a distant hum. When she awoke, she was no longer in the canyon. She was in a strange place, a town she had never seen. The sun shone through the wooden slats of a small enclosure, making shadows dance across the dusty floor. Her wrists and ankles were tied, and she could hear the chatter of people outside. Panic rose in her chest. She struggled, but the ropes were tight, cutting into her skin. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she had been captured. She was placed in a small wooden cage. It smelled of dust, sweat, and something else she could not name. The girl looked out through the bars, at the people gathering nearby. Men and women, children even, were coming to see the new arrival. Whispers ran through the crowd, voices full of curiosity, and something else she could not place. She tried to make sense of it all. Why had they taken her here? Why were they treating her like an object, as if she had no life of her own? The questions swirled in her mind, but the answers were nowhere to be found. The auctioneer's voice rang out across the dusty square. It was loud, sharp, and demanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, "we have something unusual today. A young Apache girl, brought from the wildlands to our town. Who will bid for her?" The girl's heart raced. She could not understand the words fully, but the tone was clear. She was being sold. People laughed and murmured, moving closer to the cage to get a better look. Some of them pointed at her, whispering to one another. Their eyes were filled with curiosity, greed, and something cold that made her stomach churn. She tried to speak, to tell them she was not theirs to sell, but the auctioneer shouted over her. No one listened. The reality pressed down on her like a heavy stone. A man in a wide-brimmed hat stepped forward. He squinted at her through the dust-filled sunlight. "How much do you want for her?" he called, his voice carrying across the square. The auctioneer smiled, rubbing his hands together. $2, he announced. Only $2, for a brave girl from the Apache lands. Who will start the bidding? The girl's eyes widened. $2. She had seen coins before, but they had never meant anything to her like this. They were offering her life, her freedom, for a price so small it seemed like a cruel joke. Her heart pounded, and for a moment, she felt a wave of despair so strong that she could not breathe. But then, somewhere deep inside, the fire that had always driven her surged back. She would not give up. Not yet. Not ever. The crowd laughed again, and a few voices called out higher numbers, though none were serious. She realized how little they understood her, how little they cared. The girl's mind raced. She had survived countless dangers in the mountains, had tracked game, outrun enemies, and endured hunger and pain. Could she survive this, too? Could she find a way to escape, or would she be trapped forever? As the bidding continued, she studied the people around her. Their expressions were sharp, their eyes calculating. Some were young, curious. Some were old, tired. None of them saw her as a person. She saw them for what they were, humans, fallible, greedy, weak in their own ways, but still dangerous. Her hands flexed against the ropes, her body ready to spring, to fight, to run. But there was no immediate opening. She would have to wait. Patience was her weapon now. Suddenly, a new figure appeared at the edge of the crowd. A man, tall and strong, with clothes that suggested he had worked hard all his life. His face was lined with age, but his eyes held a softness that made her chest ache with a strange, unidentifiable hope. He moved closer, carefully, observing the girl in the cage. There was no laughter on his lips, no greed in his gaze. The auctioneer noticed him and called out, "Sir, would you like to bid?" The man's voice was calm, steady. "Yes, $2, he said. The crowd murmured, $2, the lowest possible bid. They laughed and whispered, thinking him foolish. But the girl, trapped and trembling, felt a strange flicker of relief. Someone had chosen her. Not for amusement, not for gain, but simply to take responsibility. The auctioneer banged his gavel. "Sold!" he announced. The sound echoed through the square, sharp and final. The ropes around her wrists and ankles were untied, and she stepped out of the cage, blinking in the sunlight. The man looked at her, not with curiosity or ownership, but with a quiet respect. He did not reach for her. He did not call her a prize. He simply said, "Come with me. You are safe now." For the first time in what felt like forever, the girl felt a moment of freedom. She did not fully understand this man, nor did she know what awaited her, but she trusted the warmth in his voice. She followed him silently, her heart still pounding, her mind still wary. The streets of the town seemed strange, noisy, and confusing, but the fear that had gripped her in the cage began to loosen. She could breathe again. And for the first time, she imagined a future beyond capture and confinement. As they walked away from the auction square, the man glanced at her with a kind smile. "My name is James," he said simply. She looked up at him, but said nothing. She had no name to give, no words yet to form. She only nodded, feeling the weight of her chains, both physical and emotional, slowly lifting. Behind them, the sounds of the town faded, replaced by the open sky, the wind, and the promise of something new. That day, the young Apache girl learned that not all humans were cruel, that even in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, kindness could appear where it was least expected. And though she did not yet know it, her life was about to change forever. A change that would take her from fear and captivity to courage, trust, and a home she had never imagined. The man who had purchased the girl, James, led her away from the dusty auction square and toward the outskirts of the town. The streets grew quieter as they walked, and soon the sound of clanging carts and shouting vendors faded into the soft rustle of the wind through dry grasses. The girl's eyes wandered nervously, scanning the open land around her. She had never seen such wide, flat spaces, dotted with low bushes and scattered rocks. In her life among the Apache, the land had always been jagged and filled with narrow paths, canyons, and mountains. Here, the horizon stretched endlessly, and it made her feel both small and free at the same time. James walked steadily, his gait calm and measured. He did not speak much, and the girl appreciated it. Words had been confusing lately, and she had no desire to explain herself to strangers. Still, she kept glancing at him out of the corner of her eye. There was something about him that felt different from the other humans she had encountered. His face was weathered and lined, a map of years spent outdoors. His hands were rough, strong from labor, and his eyes, a soft gray, seemed to notice things others ignored. After a while, they reached a wooden gate, standing slightly crooked on old hinges. Beyond it stretched a ranch, surrounded by a fence that enclosed grazing land and a few outbuildings. A small house sat in the middle, smoke curling gently from the chimney. Horses moved slowly in the corral, and the distant bleat of sheep reached them through the quiet air. The girl paused at the gate, taking it all in. She had never imagined a place like this so open, so alive, yet calm and safe in a way the world she had known never had been. James noticed her hesitation and gave a small smile. "This is my home," he said. "You'll stay here with me." The girl's brow furrowed. "Home?" she asked softly, the word foreign and strange on her tongue. She had never had a place that could be called hers. The concept was new, almost impossible to believe. "But you bought me." James shook his head slowly. "No, I bought you. Yes, but I don't mean to own you. I mean to protect you. This place, this ranch. It's yours now, too, if you want it." She stared at him, trying to understand. His words were simple, but their meaning was heavy and real. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever treated her as a person, as someone worthy of safety or choice. Confusion and a strange hope rose together inside her chest. She wanted to trust him, but had been burned too many times before. Still, she followed him through the gate, each step hesitant, yet drawn forward by the gentle strength in his presence. Inside the house, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and baked bread. It was warm and welcoming, unlike the cramped, dusty spaces she had been forced into. James showed her a small room with a bed, simple but clean. "You can rest here," he said. "Take your time. Eat something. There's no hurry for anything." The girl nodded, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, though she had not realized it until now. James brought a plate with bread and cheese, and she ate slowly, tasting the food with quiet amazement. Each bite was new. Each flavor, a small reminder that she was still alive, that she had survived, and that maybe, just maybe, she could belong somewhere. Days passed, and the girl began to learn the rhythm of life on the ranch. She watched James as he worked with the animals, mended fences, and tended the land. There was a calmness to his work, a patience that she had never encountered. She observed the horses, the cows, and even the dogs, noting how he moved among them with respect and understanding. It reminded her of how her people treated the animals in the mountains never as tools, but as living beings with value. Slowly, she began to mirror his actions, helping where she could, learning quickly because she had learned long ago to adapt and survive. James noticed her sharp mind and quick movements. "You're a fast learner," he said one afternoon as she helped him mend a fence. The girl only nodded, her hands busy with the rope. She did not speak much, not yet. But she was learning in her own way, through observation, action, and careful attention. Evenings brought a different kind of quiet. The sun would sink behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of pink, orange, and purple. The girl would sit on the porch, watching the horizon, thinking of the mountains she had once called home, of the people she had known and lost. Sometimes, tears came unbidden, but she was learning to feel safety without shame, to breathe without fear. James would sit beside her, not forcing words, just letting her presence be enough. Over time, small moments of trust grew between them, One day, as they were mending a broken wagon wheel, the girl spoke. Her voice was low and cautious. I used to hunt with my people, she said. I can track animals. I can help you. James smiled, his eyes brightening. I would like that. Your skills are welcome here. It was the first time she felt that her abilities had value beyond survival. She had always been trained to fight, to run, to protect herself. But here, they were skills that could help, that could matter to someone else without fear or judgment. Slowly, she began to open more, showing him the ways she had learned to live in the wilderness, how to read tracks in the dirt, how to predict where water could be found, and how to listen to the land for signs of danger. James listened with patience, never interrupting, never dismissing her knowledge. In his calm acceptance, she found something rare. Respect. It was not pity, nor control, it was a recognition that she had lived a hard life and had survived through courage and skill. The girl began to feel a strange warmth toward him, a trust that grew quietly, like a seed sprouting under the sun. The ranch itself became her classroom. She learned to ride the horses, at first clumsily, then with growing confidence. She learned to tend the garden, to gather eggs, and to care for the livestock. She discovered the rhythms of the seasons, how to move with the land, how to anticipate needs. Each day brought new lessons, but also new freedoms. She could wander, explore, and yet always return to a place that was safe and her own. At night, when the wind whispered through the trees and the fire crackled softly in the hearth, she would sit beside James and watch the stars. Sometimes, she spoke of her past, of the mountains and canyons she had known, the family she had lost, the battles she had survived. James would listen quietly, never pushing, never judging. In those nights, she began to understand something important. Life could be different. There could be kindness, and there could be someone who cared for her, not as a possession, but as a person. Weeks turned into months, and the bond between the girl and James strengthened. They became a team, in the truest sense, relying on each other, learning from each other, and protecting each other. The girl began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known. Her heart, once hardened by fear and loss, softened with the knowledge that she had a home, a protector, and a companion who valued her for who she was. One afternoon, as they worked together in the fields, James paused and looked at her. This place, this ranch, it's yours as much as it is mine, he said. I have a name. But you will have one too, if you want it. You are no longer just a girl from the mountains. You are part of this land, part of this life, and you are free. The girl felt something stir deep inside her. She had survived so much, been taken from her home, caged, and sold, and yet here she was alive, valued, and free. For the first time, she considered that maybe she could choose her own path, that maybe she could belong somewhere. Truly. The fear and uncertainty of the past still lingered, but it was no longer all-consuming. She had found a protector, a teacher, and perhaps, most importantly, a friend. Life on the ranch was not always easy. There were challenges, harsh weather, stubborn animals, and the ever-present memory of her past. But with each passing day, she grew stronger, wiser, and more confident. She learned that courage was not only about fighting, but also about trusting, learning, and accepting kindness. And she learned that even the most lonely and broken lives could be mended, slowly and carefully, with patience and care. By the time the first winter winds began to blow across the plains, the girl was no longer the frightened captive who had stepped out of a cage months before. She was a skilled rider, a knowledgeable tracker, and a valued helper on the ranch. She had begun to understand the meaning of home, of trust, and of belonging. And though her heart still carried the memory of mountains, battles, and loss, it also carried something new: hope. The bond between her and James had grown into something unspoken but unbreakable, a partnership built on respect, trust, and quiet affection. He had given her more than safety. He had given her the possibility of a life she had never imagined, a life where she could grow, learn, and one day, perhaps, thrive. And in that quiet, open land, under endless skies, the young Apache girl began to imagine a future not defined by fear or captivity, but by freedom, courage, and the possibility of family. As the seasons shifted from winter to spring, the ranch blossomed with life. The air carried the scent of new grass, wildflowers, and the faint smoke from the hearth in the main house. Birds returned to the fences and trees, filling the air with their songs. For the young Apache girl, this time brought more than just the warmth of the sun and the beauty of nature. It brought the sense of belonging that had been missing from her life for so long. By now, she had become an essential part of the ranch. Each day began before the sun had fully risen, with the girl helping James feed the animals, check fences, and mend equipment. Her movements were quick and precise, a reflection of her past as a warrior and tracker. James watched her with quiet admiration, appreciating not only her skill, but her careful attention to every detail. The girl had always been trained to notice the world around her, and that gift now made her an invaluable helper. In the mornings, she would ride out with James to inspect the fields and the distant pastures. At first, she had been hesitant, unsure of the horses' temperaments, and cautious of the open spaces she did not fully understand. But with each ride, she grew more confident. She learned to read the horses' moods, to anticipate their movements, and to feel the subtle rhythms of the land beneath her. The freedom of riding, the wind on her face, brought back memories of running through the canyons of her youth. But now, those memories mingled with the calm and safety she had found. James, for his part, had begun to teach her other skills she had never been asked to learn before. He showed her how to plant and tend crops, how to use tools to repair buildings, and how to manage the livestock so they would stay healthy and strong. The girl watched him closely, asking questions when she needed to, and quickly mastered what he taught her. Yet, even as she learned new skills, she never forgot the lessons from her past. She still knew how to hunt, track, and protect herself, and she occasionally shared these skills with James, helping him anticipate weather changes or signs of wild animals nearby. One day, while they were tending the fields together, the girl noticed tracks in the soil that James had missed. She pointed them out, her eyes scanning the ground with a sharp, practiced focus. "Animals have been here last night," she said softly, moving toward the creek. They were small, but many of them. James knelt down to study the tracks. "You're right," he said, impressed. "I wouldn't have noticed them. You have an eye for detail that I've never seen before." The girl felt a quiet pride, though she did not say so aloud. Praise had always been rare in her life, and it felt strange but welcome. James's respect was different from what she had experienced before. It was genuine, and it did not carry the weight of ownership or pity. It was a simple acknowledgement of her abilities, and it meant more to her than she could fully explain. Evenings were quieter, filled with long talks and shared stories. Around the fire, James would sometimes recount tales from his youth, stories of the land, the animals, and the people who had passed through his life. At first, the girl listened silently, unsure of how to respond. But over time, she began to share her own stories, speaking of the mountains, the canyons, and the life she had known before captivity. She told him about her family, the elders who had taught her, and the skills she had learned as a young warrior. James listened patiently, never interrupting, never dismissing her words. He did not ask her to forget her past or to change who she was. Instead, he accepted her as she was, with all her experiences and memories, For the girl, this acceptance was transformative. She had spent so much of her life surviving, so much of it hiding, fighting, or running. Now, she could begin to simply be. One spring morning, James suggested they ride to a distant part of the ranch, a section of land that had been left wild for years. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice calm but excited. They rode together, the girl leading the way with confidence. The land stretched out before them, rolling hills dotted with trees and wildflowers. At the top of a gentle rise, James stopped. "This is yours," he said. "All of this. You can make it what you want, tend it, care for it. I want you to feel that this land belongs to you, as much as it belongs to me." The girl looked around, taking in the vastness of the open land. A feeling she had never experienced before rose within her, a sense of ownership, of power, and of responsibility. She realized that for the first time in her life, she had a place where she could shape the world around her. And she also realized that this place was not just land, it was freedom. Over the following weeks, she worked tirelessly to learn how to manage this new part of the ranch. She planted crops, cleared brush, and built small shelters for animals. James helped when needed, but he also allowed her to make her own decisions. Mistakes were not punished. They were lessons. And with each task completed, she grew more confident in her abilities and more connected to the land. Her warrior spirit, once focused solely on survival, began to transform. She used her tracking skills to monitor the movement of wildlife, ensuring that the livestock remained safe. She began to anticipate storms by observing the clouds and the wind, and she learned to predict the behavior of the animals in the fields. James encouraged her, often saying, "You see things I never would. You have the mind of a warrior and the heart of someone who cares. Use both." The girl also began to understand the quiet power of patience and consistency. Life on the ranch required planning and attention, not just strength or speed. She learned to observe, to wait, and to act at the right moment. These lessons complemented her natural instincts, creating a balance between her past life as a warrior and her new life on the ranch. As the days grew longer and warmer, the girl began to feel a sense of belonging that had been missing her entire life. She was no longer simply surviving. She was thriving. The land, the animals, and the routines had become part of her, just as she had become part of the ranch. And most importantly, she had come to trust James completely. He had given her more than safety. He had given her freedom, dignity, and a chance to grow into the person she was always meant to be. One afternoon, while they were repairing a fence near the edge of the wild fields, a sudden storm rolled in. The sky darkened, and the wind whipped around them, shaking the trees and sending dust swirling across the ground. James urged the girl to ride back toward the house, but she paused. Her eyes scanned the horizon, reading the signs of the storm with the precision of a warrior. She realized there was a small herd of sheep trapped near a low-lying area. Without hesitation, she guided James toward them, her movements quick and sure. Together, they led the animals to higher ground, shielding them from the wind and rain. By the time the storm passed, the herd was safe, and James looked at her with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. "You saved them," he said simply. The girl felt a quiet pride. But more than that, she felt capable, powerful, and at peace with herself. As the years passed, the girl grew into a young woman. Her body was strong, her mind sharp, and her spirit unbroken. She had learned not only the practical skills of ranch life, but also the deeper lessons of trust, patience, and compassion. James had given her a chance to build a life, but she had also given back her knowledge, her courage, and her unwavering dedication. Neighbors began to notice the transformation. The young Apache girl, once caged and sold for a few coins, had become a respected figure in the area. People came to the ranch seeking her advice on tracking, livestock, and land management. They admired her skill and determination, and they respected the partnership she had formed with James. The girl, however, never forgot her past. She remembered the mountains, the canyons, and the people she had lost. Those memories were painful, but they were also part of who she was. Instead of allowing them to define her, she used them to shape her future. She combined the wisdom of her upbringing with the knowledge she had gained on the ranch, creating a life that honored both her past and her present. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, James and the young woman stood together on the porch. The air was calm, filled with the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the glow of the sunset. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." James smiled, his eyes gentle. "No. Thank you. You brought this place to life. You brought me life, too." In that moment, the girl understood fully what she had gained. She had found more than safety and freedom. She had found trust, respect, and the ability to shape her own destiny. She had discovered that life could be more than survival. It could be growth, learning, and connection. And in the quiet beauty of the ranch, she finally felt at home. As the years continued to pass, the ranch flourished under the care of James and the young woman he had rescued. The land, once quiet and only partially used, now thrived with healthy crops, strong livestock, and fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. The young woman had grown into a confident, wise, and capable leader, admired by all who visited or worked on the ranch. Yet despite all of her accomplishments, she never forgot the journey that had brought her here, the long, painful path from fear and captivity to trust and freedom. Each morning, she rose early, before the sun painted the horizon in gold, to check on the animals and inspect the fields. Her movements were precise and strong, reflecting the discipline she had learned as a child in the mountains and the new knowledge she had gained on the ranch. She worked tirelessly, not out of obligation, but out of a deep love for the land and the life she had created. The ranch was no longer just a place to live. It was a part of her, and she, a part of it. James continued to guide her, but now more as a partner than a teacher. He trusted her judgment completely and often relied on her insight to make decisions about the land, the livestock, and even the visitors who came seeking help or advice. The young woman had learned patience, strategy, and leadership, and she wielded these qualities naturally. Where once she had only survived, now she thrived, shaping her world with a careful hand and a thoughtful heart. Visitors to the ranch often marveled at the young woman's abilities. They watched as she moved through the fields, directing workers, tending to animals, and managing the crops with skill and precision. Some came seeking guidance on tracking wild animals, planting crops, or caring for livestock. Others came simply to witness the remarkable story of the girl who had been rescued from a life of fear and had transformed it into one of hope and prosperity. She greeted everyone with humility and grace, never boasting, but always teaching what she knew. One day, a neighboring rancher came to speak with James. He looked at the young woman with awe. "I've heard stories about you," he said. "They say you're not only strong and skilled, but also wise. You've changed this ranch completely." "Ah." The young woman smiled softly, bowing her head. "It is not just me," she said. "It is this land, and James, who showed me that I could care for it. Together, we made it grow." Despite all the recognition and admiration, she remained humble. She remembered the fear she had felt in the cage, the cold days when she thought she would never be free, and the countless nights she had wished for a safe place to belong. Those memories never left her, but they no longer haunted her. They fueled her determination to live fully, to honor the past, and to protect the future. The seasons passed in their steady rhythm, and the young woman continued to explore her own identity and place in the world. She began to incorporate lessons from her Apache heritage with the knowledge she had gained on the ranch. She taught the workers and neighboring children how to observe the land carefully, to notice the subtle signs of wildlife, and to respect the animals and plants around them. In doing so, she passed on wisdom that had once been considered lost, preserving the skills of her people while adapting them to a new life. James often watched her with pride. There were moments when he would catch her quietly observing the horizon, her eyes reflecting both the memories of the mountains and the life she had built on the ranch. He knew she carried both worlds within her, and he admired the way she had balanced them. "You have become more than I ever imagined," he said one evening, as they stood together on the porch, watching the sunset. "You are strong, wise, and kind. And this land, it is alive because of you." The young woman felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet joy that came from knowing she had finally found a home, a purpose, and a sense of belonging. She understood that her journey had been long and difficult, but every hardship had shaped her into the person she had become. She had learned that courage was not only about survival, it was about trust, patience, and the willingness to grow. As time went on, she began to think about her future and the legacy she would leave behind. The ranch was no longer just a home for her and James. It had become a place where others could learn, grow, and find hope. She decided to expand the ranch to include a small school where children could come to learn about the land, animals, and practical skills needed to thrive in the world. She wanted to share the lessons she had learned: resilience, respect, courage, and the importance of trust. With James's support, she began building classrooms, gathering supplies, and inviting children from nearby towns and ranches. The first day of school was filled with laughter, curiosity, and excitement. Children listened intently as she taught them how to observe the land, care for animals, and respect the environment. She shared stories from her childhood, not to dwell on pain, but to teach the importance of resilience and hope. The students admired her strength and knowledge, and she, in turn, found joy in nurturing their growth. The young woman also began documenting her experiences, writing down what she had learned about the land, the animals, and the people she had met. She wanted to ensure that the wisdom of her past and the lessons of her present would not be lost. Her writings became a guide for future generations, a record of how courage, trust, and kindness could transform even the most difficult circumstances. Through all of this, her bond with James deepened. They shared not only the work of the ranch, but also quiet moments of reflection, laughter, and companionship. They understood each other in ways that words could not fully express. Their connection rooted in shared experiences, mutual respect, and a profound trust. The young woman realized that she had found more than a home or safety. She had found a partner who valued her for who she was and encouraged her to grow in every way possible. Years later, the ranch became a symbol of hope and renewal in the region. Travelers spoke of the young woman who had been rescued from captivity and had built a thriving, beautiful home. They spoke of her courage, wisdom, and the kindness she had shown to all who came to the ranch. People came from far and wide to learn from her, to witness the land she had nurtured, and to be inspired by her story. Yet, despite all the recognition, the young woman remained humble. She knew that the journey was never about fame or admiration. It was about the choices she had made, the lessons she had learned, and the life she had created. She remembered the cage, the fear, and the days when survival was all that mattered. Those memories had shaped her, but they did not define her. She had transformed her pain into purpose, her fear into courage, and her loneliness into connection. One evening, as she and James sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the hills, she reflected on her journey. She thought of the mountains she had left behind, the people she had lost, and the hardships she had endured. And she thought of the life she had built, the land she had nurtured, and the community she had helped create. A sense of peace settled over her, stronger than any fear she had ever known. "I never imagined life could be like this," she said softly, her eyes on the horizon. James took her hand gently. "You deserve it," he said. "You worked for it, you earned it, and you made it real. This life, it is yours, as much as it is mine." The young woman smiled, feeling the truth of his words. She understood now that freedom was not just about escaping danger or captivity. It was about finding a place where she could belong, grow, and thrive. It was about having people who respected her, a land that welcomed her, and the ability to shape her own destiny. As the years went on, the young woman continued to expand the ranch, the school, and the community around her. She trained new generations in the skills she had learned, ensuring that the knowledge of the land and the lessons of courage, patience, and respect would live on. She became a mentor, a leader, and a symbol of hope for those who had faced hardships in their own lives. The girl who had once been caged for a few coins had transformed into a woman of strength, wisdom, and influence. She had created a life filled with freedom, purpose, and love. And in doing so, she had not only changed her own fate, but had touched the lives of countless others. Though she never forgot the pain and fear of her past, it no longer controlled her. Instead, it became the foundation for a life lived fully, with courage, compassion, and determination. She had learned that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures if one had the courage to trust, to work, and to hope. And so, under endless skies and on open fields that stretched as far as the eye could see, the young woman lived a life of purpose, respect, and freedom. She had found her place in the world, and she had built a legacy that would endure for generations. Her story became one not just of survival, but of triumph, courage, and the power of kindness. The girl who had once been caged had found her home, her family, and herself. And in that discovery, she became truly free.